The pre-constructed deck Elven Empire is pretty good out of the box, but I think that there are 10 cards that we could swap out for less than $20 to make it more competitive immediately. Let's look at this pre-constructed deck filled with elves and how we would upgrade it, and the video starts right now.
Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below.
Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. We're going to talk about Elven Empire and how I would upgrade just 10 cards in there for less than 20 bucks to make it a super competitive deck. But first, if you would, go down there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you like the video by the end of it. Let's look at this command. Lathril, Blade of the Elves, is the commander of Elven Empire, 4 mana for a 2/3 menacing elf noble. Whenever Lathril, Blade of the Elves deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens, and you can tap Lathril and tap 10 untapped elves you control to have each opponent, lose 10 life and you gain 10 life. There are 3 main strategies that this pre-constructed deck is already built around that I think we can lean into and really work with. The first of that is creating elf tokens like Lysalana Huntmaster. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. We need creature tokens, specifically elves, to use Lathril's activated ability, so we want to create those as much as we possibly can. We've also got a card drawing synergy in here. That, being a black and green deck, is pretty easy to pull off with some very powerful cards that allow you to draw cards. And with a tribal deck where we're constantly just wanting to be dumping our hand, all of our elves, casting all of our creatures onto the battlefield, having the ability to re-up our hand and keep in the game for the long term is very, very important. And then obviously once we've got a board full of elves, we're either using Lathril's ability to have each opponent lose 10 life, or we're going over the top and we're going to do some overrun abilities like with Enray's Forerunners, which is included, and have all of our little elf 1/1 tokens overwhelm and completely swarm our enemies and win that way. Let's take a look at the 10 cards that I would take out of the pre-constructed deck and what cards for less than 20 bucks total I would replace those with, and then stick around at the end. I'm going to show you 3 cards that are more expensive than this video allowed for, but you should keep on your radar. First up that I would replace is Voice of Many. It's a 4 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. You could max out with 3 cards and you get a 3/3 elf here if you've got more creatures than all of our opponents. I think there's an easier way to go about your card draw where it doesn't have to have a stipulation like that, even though this is an elf. So let's just run Lifecrafter's Bestiary. 3 mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you're just passively getting to scry 1. And whenever you cast a creature spell for just 1 more green mana, you're drawing a card when you cast it, not even if it resolves. So Lifecrafter's Bestiary represents a lot of potential energy here for your velocity to make sure that you can keep going. It's a $1 card, and I think it's a good swap out for that elf because we'll be putting other elves into this deck. Harvest Season is another card where it's just the stipulations, man. It's a really strong card, but I just don't want to have to fulfill these little obligations for this to work. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So you got to have tapped creatures onto the battlefield. If you do, it's an excellent ramp spell that's got a lot of potential, but I just don't want to have to fulfill that obligation, especially when we can run something like Skyshroud Claim. 4 mana, go get 2 forests, so they could be dual lands. Forest islands, 4 swamps, I guess in this case. It is a black and green deck, Joel. But I would rather for 4 mana guarantee that I'm going to go get 2 lands that tap for both of my colors of mana, then potentially get cards with Harvest Season. Skyshroud Claim is a $1 card, so it's easy to slot into this deck. We've also got Eyeblight Massacre, which is a sorcery in this deck. Non-elf creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Now, you may be thinking, oh, that's really good. All of our creatures are going to be elves, so all the other creatures can get -2/-2. It's fine. At sorcery speed, it doesn't really make it a combat trick. If it was instant speed, I think this would have some playability, but other than that, -2/-2 is just not impactful enough, especially when we could run Skyshroud Poacher. 4 mana 2/2, pay 3, go search your library for any elf and put that card into play. I would rather be expanding our board than giving our opponent's creatures -2/-2, which probably won't even kill him in the first place. Grabbing any elf we want at any CMC from our deck and putting it straight into play is hugely valuable, but this card is only $3, and I think it's got a home in this deck for sure. Jaspera Sentinel is in this deck. It's a 1 mana 1/2 with reach, and It taps to add mana, but you have to tap it and tap another untapped creature you control, which I never really like. I don't like stipulations. I like for cards to just work. So with the Sentinel, there are much stronger elves that we can be running in this deck for synergy, and one of those is Azuri Renegade Leader. For only 3 mana, you're getting a 2/2, 1 green to regenerate another target elf, so saving other elves from destruction is what Azuri does. Plus, like I said with Enray's Forerunners at the beginning, we're able to go over the top. That activated ability down there, 3 green, 2 other elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample. That's exactly what we want as a finishing role in this deck. Azuri is a $2 card, and I think you should swap that out for Jaspera Sentinel. Bounty of Skimfar is a new card that's in this deck. Reveal the top 6 cards of your library, put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and an elf card from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is fine. I just don't think that it's super impactful. 3 to get a land just from the top 6 and maybe an elf into your hand. That could be valuable, but I just don't think it's got the impact we want in a game of Commander. So let's swap it out for Skimfar Avenger. Every time one of our non-token elves dies, we're going to get to draw a card and have to lose a life for that. But anything dying on the battlefield is going to keep our hand full, which is all that Bounty of Skimfar wants to do in the first place, is keep our hand full and ramp us a little bit. With Skimfar Avenger, if anything dies and it's a non-token, we're getting those cards off of our library replaced into our hand as those things are dying for just 1 life lost, which is not that big of a deal. Skimfar Avenger is currently a $1 card at time of shooting this, and I think makes a great swap for that to sort of fulfill a similar role. Tergrid's Shadow, each player sacrifices 2 creatures at instant speed, and it's got Foretell, so you can cast it for 4 as long as you foretell it for 2 on your own turn. Again, it's fine. I think that, you know, not being able to target or just kill everything kind of holds this back for me. I get that it's Deece removal though. But again, I just want to keep filling up our board, and Vivian's Arcbow is going to let us do that. Pay X, tap it, discard a card, so pitch that land late game that you don't need. Look at the top X cards of your library, put a creature card with CMC X or less from among them straight onto the battlefield. That's where I want to be living. I want to be constantly putting more threats onto the battlefield. Vivian's Arcbow is a 50-cent card and represents some really good card advantage for you. Roots of Wisdom is a common in here. Mill 3 cards, then return a land card or elf card from your graveyard to your hand. If you can't draw a card, it's fine. Again, I just don't think it's as impactful as I want. And if all we're trying to do is get, you know, stuff back or put stuff onto the battlefield or stay in the game longer, there's other ways we can do that, namely with a card called Court of Calling. 3 green X, and it can convoke with all of your 1/1s that you're already creating. Search your library straight up for a creature card with CMC X or less and put it onto the battlefield. So if you can get X, this is another finisher. I mean, Enray's Forerunner is one of the finishers built into this deck. So if we can get enough mana or convoke enough mana together to go and get Enray's Forerunner straight onto the battlefield, that's a potential finish there. And Court of Calling being only $3, I like having that backup on your win con to go and get your big, you know, stompy thing that's going to give all of your creatures a ton more power and toughness and trample so that you can just overrun your opponents. Elderfang Disciple enters the battlefield. Each opponent discards a card for 2 mana. Not bad, but again, more impact. We want impact, or we want things that are going to make our line stronger, and all this leaves over behind it is a 1/1 elf cleric. So let's swap that out for Elvish Warmaster from Kaldheim. Whenever 1 or more other elves enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 elf. So we're just going to get more value, more tokens going, and closer to using Lathril's activated ability to finish the game. Plus, overrun ability built in. You'll see that as a sub-theme here. We want as many available options just to be able to overrun when we need to. Have a huge army on the battlefield, give them all +2/+2 and death touch until end of turn for all that extra mana you got left over sitting around. Elvish Warmaster for just $1 is a great card to do this, and presenting the value of getting additional 1/1 elves and also an overrun ability when you need it. Fantastic card, and I'm a huge fan of it. Elderfang Ritualist, again, dies, return another target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. That's great if we've got some elves in the graveyard. If our graveyard hasn't been hated out of the game yet, it's possible we could get something cool from our graveyard to our hand, but I would just rather it have more impact, so let's go with Elvish Champion. +1/+1 and Forest Walk to all of your elves. Anything that says unblockable is just so strong in a token creature generating deck. And to give them all Forest Walk, I mean, you know, watching this, you know how often green is played in Commander. Somebody's going to have a forest, and if you slam Elvish Champion, that's as good as slamming like Enray's Forerunners or something in some cases, because all of your 1/1s are suddenly going to be unblockable and they turn into 2/2s just from Elvish Champion. 3 mana for a 2/2. Yeah, I'm a real big fan of the champion here from 10th edition. It's a $4 card, so it's the most expensive that we've got on this list, but I definitely think it's worth it because this is kind of a win condition on a stick. I'm a big fan. Lastly, we've got Ambition's Cost. This is a card that came in the Precon to keep cards in your hand. Like I said, card draw seemed to be a sub-theme right out of the box. Ambitions cost 4 mana to draw 3, lose 3. Really good. I run this card in some decks, but I just want to highlight how with these Precon decks, there are some cards that you can take out and replace that will be more synergistic and have more impact. And Return of the Wild Speaker does that when you replace Ambition's Cost with it. What have we talked about? Drawing cards, which this does. It's modal, so you've got choice, and I really like versatility. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Great. I mean, minimum, it's not that great of a return, but 5 mana instant speed. If we've got Lathril on the battlefield, that's drawing 2. And we go up from there. Plus, it's instant speed. Now, Return of the Wild Speaker also presents us with the ability for non-human creatures we control to get +3/+3 until end of turn, again, at instant speed. And so having that versatility, having Ambitions Cost out and return in, it's 1 more mana, and we may not get a full 3 cards if we're not in a good situation. This is normally a card I wouldn't like for that reason. I think that's a downside of this card, is you do need a creature on the battlefield, and you know how I like cards to do what they do by themselves. But the ability to potentially refill your hand for a lot if you've got a really high powerful creature on the battlefield, or having an overrun built into another card is hugely valuable. So those are the 10 cards that I would swap out for under 20 bucks to make the deck more competitive. Let's look at 3 cards real quick that should be on your radar that are more expensive than this video allowed for, but I think you should absolutely be looking into. One obviously is Heroic Intervention. This is a $6 card, but for 2 mana, having all of your permanents gained hexproof and indestructible is huge for this deck. Like I said, you want to stay on the battlefield and rebuild your hand if your battlefield gets wiped off, because you need a board presence with this deck to really be playing at your maximum efficiency. Heroic Intervention is going to help you keep your board position once you've grabbed it. Like I said, $6 card. Freyalise is a $4 card. It's a 5 mana, 3 loyalty planeswalker. But that +2 to create a 1/1 elf druid that also taps for mana, fantastic. Plus you've got the versatility to -2 and destroy an artifact or enchantment. And then if you need it, and you can get there, -6 to draw a card for each green creature you control. You can see how much of our synergy is built into this one planeswalker that really is, to me, a 5 mana enchantment that will create 1/1 elf druid tokens, just however long it stays on the battlefield. And for a $4 card, it's got a lot of upside for this quote-unquote enchantment. If it stays a long time in the game, that'll give you a lot more value as we go through the game. And then Genesis Wave, $6 card, 3 green X, reveal the top X cards of your library, put any number of permanent cards, including lands, with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. This is huge. If you can dump a ton of mana into this, if you've got a lot of mana dorks and a lot of mana rocks, and you've got all your lands that you've ramped up because you're in green, having a huge Genesis Wave go off can really put a lot of stuff onto the battlefield all at once, especially with a deck that's got such a low converted average CMC. Most of these cards that we're looking at, 3 to 5 mana. And so if you can cast Genesis Wave for 8 mana, anything 5 or less, plus all the lands that you hit, are just going to get put right onto the battlefield immediately. $6 card, definitely think it should be on your radar to eventually include in this deck. That's how I would upgrade Lathril, Blade of the Elves in Elven Empire. Let's close the book. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know down below what cards you're putting into Lathril that I forgot, and let us know how much they cost too. That's sort of the focus of this series, is upgrading for not a ton, so I'd like to see how you are accomplishing that. While you're down there commenting, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. Other than that, I'm tapped out, and I'll catch you later.